when you're ready, bring your awareness forward. No hurries, no worries. Very nice to transition smoothly and gently. So before we begin, as I promised, I'd make a little time at the start in case anyone had any questions or things that have come up during the week that might pop up. So I'll just pause and take a drink of hot water and see if anything simmers up. Otherwise, we'll get right into it. Bless you. Okay. So if we don't have time to discuss something during a talk, and during the week maybe something pops up, feel free to jot it down. So we'll make a little time right at the start and see if we can shed any light on it. So we'll begin now with the Eightfold Path in our daily life. And in order to really introduce this, we have to understand the Eightfold Path is part of the Four Noble Truths. And this is fundamental to Buddhism. This is the core teaching of the Buddha. Real beauty here is that I've found in my lifetime is it's so practical and it's about removing suffering. And on various levels, with various degrees of meaning and understanding, it can work literally for anybody and can be applied to a lot of different religious and spiritual beliefs as well. Though on the full lineage, of the path, to dig that hole 100 feet deep, it can take you to enlightenment as an intrinsic Buddhist path. But there's some truth that's truth. And you'll find this is a path that bears investigation to look into, see what is the cause of my suffering. So within that, First Noble Truth is often called the truth of suffering. And usually the first thing a teacher tells you is it's a poor translation. It's really the truth of dukkha. And dukkha, which gets translated as suffering, is much more subtle and has a layered context. So often then they'll go to, it's not quite suffering as much as unsatisfactoriness. That the life that we have, the experience of our life, is pervaded by this unsatisfactoriness. There's nothing in this world during this physical lifetime that's going to provide us any sense of real lasting happiness or contentment. That, on a very basic level, we are all subject to just being human, birth, aging, sickness, and death. No way to avoid it. We're all one day closer to our death. That's the nature of things. And everyone you meet will come and go. And all of us are subject to getting ill, having loved ones leave us, whether they pass away or whether they just choose to move on. The life that we have is filled with these outer levels of suffering. They call this the suffering of suffering, 3 levels. The first one's real obvious. We have a lot of suffering from just being human, from losing relationships, from breaking a leg. These things are just manifest. And every day that we show up, we're one day closer to our death. And whereas this is pretty obvious, we all know what it's like to have depression or sadness or anger, frustration, suffering of suffering. And everybody can pretty much get that. The next level is this suffering of change. And this is trickier. Often the cause of much more suffering in our life. One of the great quotes, and I think it was Gandhi, I'm not certain. I think it was, though, that the search for happiness is the cause of most of our unhappiness. And this really exemplifies the suffering of change. That anything that we find in our life outside of ourselves that's going to provide any happiness transforms into suffering. And you can really trace almost any object. We think inherently, the usual example a Tibetan Lama will give you is eating. Laura's found this really incredible pie that she's baked. It's got this, was it brownie at the bottom, right? A layer of just brownie at the bottom. Then a layer of pumpkin. And then pecan. And it's all layered into each other. Completely vegan and really wonderful. One would say it is delicious. And that this would bring me happiness to have my pie. It's like 3 in 1. So typically a Lama will say, yeah, your first bite's delicious, a piece may be delicious. Second piece, not as delicious. Third piece, well, it's starting to get painful. And then we're gonna suffer, and the pie stops being delicious. The pie stops being, wonderful. It changes. If we don't have the pie, we go home and there is 1 piece left, and Laura ate the pie. Now I'm devastated, sad. I was counting on that pie. I used to live with a little Tibetan monk. He was just a classic example. It's funny because they give these simple analogies, but they give them because they happen so frequently. I used to live with this little round jolly monk. He was great. He asked me how he's doing. Oh, I'm wonderful. How you doing? And he's just, just compassionate and always happy, little round guy. Just like if you were to prototype, you want to do a film on a little Tibetan monk. I mean, this would be him. His name was Lundrup, and I lived with him in my house, and one of Lundrup's favorite things was momos, Tibetan momos, little dumplings. They're a great dish, and Tibetans, it's really fine dining. And so every now and then at the monastery down the street, we'd have momo night, and Tibetans would come in. We're having momos, and he's all fired up, momos, and they'd have momo eating contests, and I would just, because I'd lived with him for a couple of years. I knew what was going to happen. He'd go have momos. He'd be out there all night. They're playing, seeing old Tibetan friends. Come out. In the morning, I'd get up early. I'd get my coffee. I'd sit on the couch, and I'd just put my feet up. I'm waiting for him to come out. Because he would stagger out of the room. Oh, too many momos. It was like at a front seat. I was just, I could count on it. And it was just funny to me because it was one of the typical teachings an old Lama would say, we eat too much and then you get into just so the suffering of change. And I would get to just watch it in real life. It was, and I could bank on it too. It was pretty funny. I just get comfortable. So on a more subtle level, these things all change, right? Our brand new car. Right? Brand new car, that's pretty cool. One of these days I'm going to get one. And it's going to have heated seats. That's going to be cool. Heated seats. Maybe one of those little things that starts up. You have those people that push the button, it starts up and it's warmed up so they get in their car with heated seats. Yeah, right. I don't know if I'll ever have one. But if I did, that'd be really cool. But what happens when we get a new car? Then what happens is we kind of start to worry about where we park it, and did I lock it, and and then how much we go to maintain it, and then there becomes an anxiety and a fear, over protecting it, and if somebody hits it or bumps into it, now there's a lot of suffering. So this thing that's going to give me all this joy becomes something that can be quite a bit of suffering. I observed this with a guy who just had a new car and somebody bumped him, and he was out of that car in the middle of traffic yelling and freaking out at this poor little girl who was driving and who just tapped him from behind. And what had happened, if you looked at the license plate, it was a brand new car. He didn't even have plates yet. I was thinking, wow, that's really providing a lot of happiness. And so this thing that's going to provide it, we just got a new bike for the wedding gift, and it's this really cool bike that get to go to the grocery store on. And it's funny because my other bike, I didn't care where I parked it. But this bike, we got a padlock, That's really cool, I'm gonna lock it. And so we start to see how something that's going to provide us happiness also can bring us some suffering, some discomfort, some worry, some concern. And then people we love in our life, right? When they go, and it's a lot of pain. Or even if they don't go, if they're in our life day-to-day basis, you may notice that there's some conflict that arises in the person that you love. And there's some suffering that goes along with that. So something that provides happiness and we really put a lot of energy towards becomes something that creates suffering of change. Things change. We've learned that quite often. Things change, and we want it to be the same. And the level of joy or happiness around anything is going to change. There's a graph that I saw, and I used in a presentation once, and it had this graph of how much happiness, like right before you're about to buy something that you really want, and then you buy it the day you buy it, and then 3 months later, and then a year later, how much happiness that same item is giving you. And then when you lose it, and the suffering actually went down here, and then finding it again. But this thing never gave any consistent happiness, and things are like that. So this way that we suffer a lot chasing things outside of ourselves to make us happy. It's not going to last, and it'll actually transform into suffering. Suffering when we don't have it, suffering when we lose it, suffering when it becomes different. Our partners change on us. Right? Things change. Now, on a more subtle level, this pervasive suffering, this is really where Buddhism gets a little leg up, and we can kind of get the other stuff pretty easily. But pervasive suffering is intrinsically that we're not going to find a level of satisfaction in things in ourselves. And we're not going to have much peace of mind in a sense. As soon as we get to a nice, peaceful place, and we've worked really hard to get there, there can be, if it's a really sweet, comfortable place, we might worry about, wow, how can I stay here? I'm worried about it. Or it's a nice, peaceful, content place. I'm here. We might go, well, what else can I do? There's this just basic level intrinsically that is finding no way of being content and just well. That pervasively in the life that we have, where we have these mental afflictions that arise in our life, even sitting still, and we've done it, right? We sat still. You guys just meditated. I'm sure you guys were all like way into it, and my mind wandered a bit, and things came up. And if we sit and meditate, you're going to notice things come up, and habits and thoughts, and as we interact with people, mental afflictions arise, and this level is just the condition of existence. And it's very difficult to find any sort of sense of inner peace and well-being that I can take into the moments of my life continuously. So on these 3 levels of suffering, the Buddha looked at this and he goes, is this necessary? Is this necessary? And the Buddha went and he meditated with the incredible masters of the time. He went and went through all the stages of meditation, trained with the top-notch gurus of the time, and achieved all the levels of really samadhi, and did all the things that all the great swamis did, and achieved the levels that are just blissful, peaceful, non-dual. It's wonderful. And then he came out of meditation and everything was still the same. You know, I went and I meditated. I achieved samadhi. I went through the jhanas, and he said, you know, this is not it. This is not liberation. It's a vacation. When I come out of meditation, I'm still subject to mental afflictions, and I'm still in this world that's made up of pervasive suffering, dukkha. And that didn't do it. That did not liberate me. I'm still subject to the laws of karma. And this began the quest, you know, when he really thinking about how can you eliminate, is there a liberation? And his journey was all about that path to liberation. And he went off and, you know, studied in ways that were just really physically demanding, and all the practices of the time. He went through them all, and eventually he found this path that liberated him. And it was an interesting piece because he took the insight meditation, this incredible vipassana, these high levels of samadhi, and he remembered a time. He remembered a time when he was a kid, and a time where he just slipped into this nice state, which we call shamatha now, this state of shamatha. And he remembered that, where it's not the highest level of samadhi in the sense of all the jhana factors, but it's this deep abiding space. And he thought, could that be the way? And could I really come down and put my mind in this calm state of being, and then in that state pick up these meditation practices of vipassana and directly look at the nature of reality? And that was his big innovation, was to combine shamatha with vipassana, and in that state was able to directly experience the nature of reality and liberation and immerse himself in it. And in that process, the wisdom of this path and how do we get that opportunity came around. And in that, he saw that the core root of suffering, and second one, what's the cause of suffering? If we want to get rid of suffering, if we want to get rid of dukkha, we need to know its cause. No cause, no result. So when he really got down to it, they'll teach that there's three root poisons, the real roots of our suffering, the things that keep us trapped in a conditioned existence. And those three things, you know, when we translate into English, there's different words that people use. Ignorance is usually the primary ignorance, misperception, greed or attachment, aversion, and some people call hatred. But I like to use ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And from these three things that are present in our mental continuum, all the other delusions grow. These are the root. And it's important to identify the root, because if we can sever that root, the others go away. They all come from this root. So I looked at it and he said, well, of the three, there's one that's primary. And the primary one that really keeps us stuck in a cycle of existence that is conditioned, that is limited, that is unsatisfying in lifetime after lifetime. The root core is this misperception, the ignorance. And out of the misperceiving myself and you, and the world that I live in, I look at this world and there's some things I really like, I attach to. And there's some things I don't like and I want to avoid, aversion. So out of a sense of John, this really solid John, it's me separate from you, I, as a little kid, start crawling around. There's some things I like. You know how little kids are, they'll shove anything in their mouth first, right? I like that. Is it worthwhile? You know, put it back, and some foods they like and some things they don't like. And there's some things that I really like, and in order to get those, I'm going to do stuff to get what I want. And even as a kid, we're going to scream for it or crawl for it or, wait till mom's out of the room. And I'm going to get what I want. And what's happening as I'm doing that, I'm creating karma. Every movement of my mind creates karma. And the karmas really helps with this aspect of what limits us is we're limited by karma and klesha, mental afflictions. That's what keeps us conditioned. So the rules of karma come. And I'm creating a lot of karma as I try to get what I want. And I create a lot of karma to avoid the things I don't want, aversion. And from these, we get everything else. This is where anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, the list of pride and envy and all these things that come that create all this multitude of karma that creates our experience of the world that we live in come from. It comes from us. And at the root, it comes from us misperceiving ourselves and the world out there. And the stuff that we get attached to, we think is going to really give us some happiness. And the stuff that we're trying to avoid, we think is intrinsically painful. And it's misperceived. And in that sense, we create all this karma. And the karma winds up being a lens through which we experience the world that we live in. And a real simple way of looking at this is how we misperceive things is we think intrinsically, for example, the pie I talked about is delicious. Right? We've had this talk before. Is the pie delicious? I want some more pie. It's delicious. And we all know, those of you who've been coming for a while, the pie is not in itself delicious, right? There's no delicious in the pie. Try to find it. No matter how much I enjoy that pie, someone else will not like that pie. Pie is not intrinsically delicious. But my perception is, it is, and I want more. The truth is, more accurately, I'm having an experience of pleasure when I eat this conditioned item we label a pie. Yeah, so when I eat the pie, I have a delicious experience. And we can do this with all foods and stuff, but our misperception is that pie is delicious and it is giving me all the pleasure. When in fact, I've created the karma to have a pleasurable experience when the pie reaches my mouth. Do we have more of that, right? Yeah, okay, just check. I know, I got us on the strudel thing, got us on a few things, but this pie, that's another thing. So, but then out of our attachment, right, and people we like, even like my brother, right? Somebody picks on my brother, what do? I get angry. And out of anger, now I've got another delusion. The anger's coming as a misperception of something, and now I'm creating more karma and more kleshas in my life, mental afflictions, anger, resentment, and then I hear about somebody talks bad to my brother, or somebody talks bad to my wife. You don't talk to her like that. And then the possessiveness and anger arises. Seeking to avoid things, I'm going to create a whole lot of other karma too. We don't want Louis to come in. Oh my God, Louis! Oh, geez, quick, tell him we're not here. And now I'm lying. Now I'm creating, a whole nother set of karmic imprints. And what's happening is I keep reacting to the world as though it is this objective, independent, outside thing, when in fact the world's not like that at all, right? The world we experience is relational and subjective. There's no absolutes out there. You can't get your measuring stick out there and measure the way the world is. It doesn't work like that. Quantum physics had really shown that. If you take the person measuring out of the equation, time has to freeze for it to work. And actually things keep moving. So the world that we experience is subjective. And it's subjective for a lot of reasons. But our karmic imprint is our biggest determinant factor of whether that pie is going to be delicious or not. I mean, there's a lot of conditions there. But whether I'm going to have a delicious experience or not has a whole lot more to do with how I lived my life than the pie itself. But we focus on the pie itself. That person, if they would just change, I would be happy. And so out of this misperception of myself, the way the world works, the things I like and the things I don't like, a myriad of other kleshas arise, these mental afflictions of anger, resentment, jealousy, that just keep us in this cycle of conditioned existence. And we keep planting the seeds that provide our experience of the world. So I looked at this, he said, well, here we are in this conditioned existence, samsara. And we're subject to it life after life after life. There's a cause for it. We've identified it. And the third noble truth is cessation. We can get out of it. We can end this. You can get rid of, if you eliminate the cause, there's no result. So there is a path here. And the path becomes this fourth noble truth that says, here's the path to remove, to attack the roots. If we want to attack the root of ignorance, we need to cultivate wisdom. We need to see things as they are. And that's really the whole thing he taught, was how to see the nature of reality. This whole path is about learning to see clearly. Now, it's a path, though, because we can't just tell you, well, here's the way it is, and you're okay. Because actually, we've had that talk, haven't we? We've had the talk about emptiness, karma, the nature of experience, and we've explained it. It takes about 15 minutes. And yet you guys still have mental afflictions. What's up? What's up? I'm not getting that. Yeah. And this is a really common, I find it especially funny in our culture, because we're a culture of the people that read a book and put it on the shelf, or read half a book and put it on the shelf. Or I read that and I've read that, and I'll tell you, yeah, I've read that. Yeah, what's in the book? You know, I don't remember. And knowing something will not change you. That is not the force. You and I here, we'll have a talk. Worry. Does anyone here think it's good to worry? Anybody? Anybody think it's good? Healthy? Good to worry? How about the fact that worry not only is not good, there's no reason for it. Like, is there actually a reason to worry? And we can ponder that one. We can have a nice, fresh discussion. I'm convinced thoroughly that there's absolutely makes no sense to worry. Either I will be able to deal with the situation, in which case no reason to worry, or I won't be able to deal with the situation, in which case worrying about it won't help. Is one of my favorite quotes, I don't know, I can't name the person, but one of the favorite quotes is, worry does not make for a better tomorrow. It just drains today of its joy. Right? And that's what happens. And how much of our worry in life ever even happens? And so we could sit here and I could, have a nice philosophical conversation and say, well, okay, worrying's silly and doesn't even make sense, so I'm not going to worry anymore. Good luck. Good luck. Knowing something doesn't change it. And this is where the Buddha says we need to realize this knowledge. It's not an intellectual knowledge. It's not, being able to quote or debate or understand on an intellectual level. It's a realization, an inner knowing of the truth of it. So in order to get there, and we have this mind that is just covered with mental afflictions and this karma and klesha that filters things, and I can't see clearly. It's like my experience of the world is this like dirty lens, and I can't quite see clearly. And if I'm going to acquire wisdom, I'm going to get little pieces at a time, and it's going to be like clearing the windshield a little bit, so I can actually see how things work. Intellectually, I can tell you that the pie is not delicious, but you're still going to think it's pretty damn delicious. Right? And But the characteristic of it, the pie, we would say, is empty of deliciousness. It's not, the pie is a condition from which I get to experience delicious, which is more accurate. So if we're going to really start to gain this wisdom, we have to, A, have some intellectual understanding of how the world does work, and start living in a way that's in accordance with that, and see if that doesn't create the proper conditions from which I can really cultivate the wisdom to eliminate suffering in my life. And so the Eightfold Path is broken into 3 parts, and we've covered this a bit: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And the path of Dharma is really one that, and it's set up very systematically, ethics being a foundation. If I want to start to create conditions from which wisdom can grow and where I can see clearly, ethics is the purifying karma, the good stuff. If I live more ethically, I'm going to stop putting up a bunch of filth on my windshield. Right? I'm going to create good karma. I'm going to stop putting all the filthy stuff in there that's anger, resentment, jealousy, and all that stuff that is just clouding up. If I keep just flinging mud on my windshield, I'm not getting anywhere. So ethics is this, the higher training of ethics is a piece that creates the conditions where I can start to clear that. And when I live more ethically and more calmly, well, then that's going to help me with the next level, which is concentration, to where I can direct my mind, have a clear, balanced, alert mind to work with. So if I'm calm, if I feel good about myself, ethical living, I create the conditions from which I can now learn to meditate, get some stabilization. And with a clear mind, based on a foundation of ethics, I can then take up the higher training of wisdom. But I cannot penetrate the nature of reality with a mind that's all over the place. I can't get a mind that's not over the place when I'm constantly subjecting it to anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, and chasing worldly things that are just keeping me stuck in a cycle. So in this path, he really wanted to integrate. Step 1 is really everything that we do that creates good karma, merit, ethical living is going to create a condition from which I can have a more calm and balanced mind, a serviceable mind that I can now direct to the nature of reality. And so this is contained within the Eightfold Path. And everything within the Eightfold Path is going to help you cultivate a better way of living ethically, a concentrated mind, and to participate in the world as it is with some wisdom. And so the piece on ethics, there's three of the 8 go to ethics. And that's right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So those are in the ethics part. So that makes sense. My speech is ethical if my actions are ethical, if my livelihood is ethical. There's 3 that are contained in concentration, and that's right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. And then there's 2 that go in the wisdom category, and that's right view and right intention. So it has this nice system. We get a little more ethical. We start living ourselves in the right thinking instead of trying to think ourselves in the right living because you read the book and it should all be good. We actually have to go out and do it, create the conditions. And then with this ripe condition, this field that we've cultivated, we can really get some concentration and apply to our wisdom. Well, then you look at the Eightfold Path. So wisdom is the final goal. But the first thing in the Eightfold Path is right view, the wisdom. So he starts you with the wisdom to take you to wisdom. And it's not a mistake. It really starts with right view, and this is what we really want to start with in our practical way of living in the world, is to start to see the world more clearly. If I have a right view, at least an intellectual knowledge, well, now this can direct my activities in a way that'll be in accordance with the path and the components of the path. So if I keep thinking that the pie is delicious, or that Louis is a jerk, or that that they're the cause of my mental anguish, if I keep thinking that way, I'm never going to get anywhere, no matter how ethical I am, and so forth. I'm misdirected because I'm misperceiving myself in the world. So we start with just starting to understand how the world is. And if I can start to get that intellectually, well, now I can test it. And the beauty of this is it's testable. You try it out. Does it work? Few people have tried it out over the last, over 2,500 years. It seems to be holding up. And but everyone has their experience of this, and we really encourage people to. So if we start to investigate with the right view, they have mundane right view and then the superior right view. So the mundane is our working basis. We start to understand that the world we live in is experienced through my karmic imprints, that what I do has an effect. And if we can start to understand the laws of karma a bit, now karma is very complicated. In our Tibetan teachings, we would say that direct realization of karma is more difficult to obtain than direct realization of the nature of reality. Pretty complicated. So karma, there's personal karma, our group karma we're creating tonight, karma of Carbondale, karma that been created over the time. There's the county, USA karma, world karma, the samsara karma. There's all these layers of karma. Very complicated. But on a very basic level, we can kind of get the piece that very simple working hypothesis. All of my pleasure is a result of virtuous activity. All of my suffering is a result of my non-virtuous activity. Pretty simple dynamic. But it says that the more seeds that I create, karmic imprint seeds, that I plant in my consciousness, the more pleasurable experience I'm going to have. The more ethical I am, the more pleasurable experience. The more unethical, the more unpleasant experience. That, and if I understand this, if I plant these good seeds, all my pie is going to be delicious. Those situations that were so difficult before become tolerable. That person that I really couldn't stand, I can stand them now. And they haven't really changed in that sense. I mean, everybody changes and everything changes, but what's happening is I'm changing. My experience of the world changes, and it's changing as a result of how I'm living my life. And so just a real simple, all happiness comes from virtuous activity, all suffering from non-virtuous activity. Very simple. Well, then the next question is, well, what's virtuous activity? And it's great because in Buddhism, they don't have, right and wrong. They just simply define virtuous and non-virtuous as if this leads to a pleasant experience, it's virtuous. So they can't be wrong, right? And if this leads to an unpleasant experience, it's non-virtuous. And that's really the definition. There's no good and bad, evil and this and that. We're creating the world we live in. We are. And we're not good or bad. We're human and life's messy. And out of our attempts at being happy, we do some things out of deluded states, not really understanding how the world works. We sling a lot of mud on our windshield, a lot. And that's just what we do. It's because we don't know any better. We just don't know any better. But you now have this moment to know better. The secret's out. The shell has been cracked. You can change things. You can liberate yourself. You have a rare and precious human rebirth. So hard to get, so easily destroyed. You gain its life once. You have it. And it's taken eons of lifetimes, and you're here right now. You have it. That's something to just be with for a moment. Very few humans have it. Very few humans are going to understand what we're talking about. Very few will even be interested. But the truth is, if we have this wisdom, this opportunity, we can cultivate this path now. And we can cultivate it right now. We can start right now. And I'll start to understand that my happiness is not the new car with the heated seats. I mean, I'd enjoy it if it was there for a moment. But my happiness has to come from how I'm living my life and how I'm showing up. And so at this point in a traditional Buddhist teaching, they're going to tell you that there's, well, in a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they'll tell you there's 84,000 delusions and things that you got to work with. But fortunately, there's a top 10 list. So there's like 10 ways we get and create a lot of karma that's harmful. And they call it the 10 non-virtuous actions. And they're body, speech, and mind. We're good with numbers, right? Eightfold Path, 3 higher trainings, 3 go into the 8. Well, within the 10 non-virtuous, they're body, speech, and mind. So they go into the categories of 3 again. And so they say there's these 10 non-virtuous actions that of them all, they seem to create most of the problems. And so the 3 that we do most with our body, 3 of the body, is stealing, killing, and sexual misconduct. So taking what's not ours. And that's, a lot of people think, well, I don't really steal. And then we'll go, really? How much of that stuff from the office is at your house? Or, did you really clock out for the time that you were on the phone, stealing time from work? Or, did we return the ladder we borrowed, 8 months ago? Oh, yeah, right. It's not that we're busting into houses, but are we stealing? Are we taking from others? Even in our income tax, there's a lot of ways that are pretty interesting that we rationalize what's mine and think about that. So stealing, killing, and really, we like to fine tune that to harming, But there's a lot of ways of killing and harming others, and this goes out to all beings. And then sexual misconduct, if you can really see a lot. You just open the news today, and you will see a lot of damage done around sexual misconduct. It's pervasive. What's it? 1 in 5 college women are assaulted. 1 in 5. That's amazing. This time in just sexual misconduct in the sense of, I work with a lot of people, and a lot of people are addicted to pornography and video on the computer, and it's just pervasive. There's a lot of ways that we hurt ourselves and others. It's not just others. We hurt ourselves around that. So of the top 3 with the body, it's stealing, killing, sexual misconduct. And in sexual misconduct, they're just talking about, are you hurting yourself or others? They're not saying, how you should have sex or anything like that. It's just, is this consensual? Is it healthy? Is it meaningful? As opposed to harmful to self or others. And then there's 4 with speech. So we can guess right off the bat, lying's one. And that one's pretty interesting because lying can come up pretty easy. There's divisive speech, and this is really subtle. Divisive speech is where we think of, where we divide people with our speech in a sense. So I make you think less of someone, because I'll tell you about so-and-so. And we divide people. And what's our real intention there? Harsh speech. Harsh speech is where I hurt you with my speech. And that's funny because it can, it's not me yelling at you. Sometimes, I could cut somebody right to the heart with some real sweet words, they're malicious. So am I saying this to hurt you? And then the last one is this sort of, goes in this category of sort of idle chatter or gossip, that we talk about. Is it really necessary to talk? And that gets into a lot of trouble. It's how much are we talking just to talk? Yeah. And then say things that, yeah, probably need not be said. And then the third category is of the mind. So we have body, speech, mind. And actually, we'd count it the other way. We go body, speech, mind. And in the mind, it's number one is covetousness, coveting what others have. That creates a lot of, you can just see that's just suffering on its face. The next one is ill will, wishing that somebody gets theirs, that they suffer, they're really going to get theirs. And then the last one is wrong view, which is bringing us right up to our whole point here. Wrong view. This is on the category of right view. Wrong view is obviously going to create a lot of problems. It's going to create a lot of problems. And out of wrong view, I'm going to create a lot more karma. It's just slinging mud on my windshield. So, I mean, even when we call someone a bad person, right, they're a bad person. It's a wrong view. I've never met a bad person. I have met people who have done really terrible things. I've never met a bad person. I've met a lot of human beings that have done some really wonderful things. I've never met a good person. That same good person has done a lot of harmful things. The bad person, label, has done a lot of good things. And they're not the things. They're responsible for the things they did. But those actions don't define their inner nature. So if we understand more of a correct view, we understand that people are human, life's messy, and my experience of someone, as whether I like them or don't like them, has a lot more to do with me than them. And as I change, they change. My experience of them changes, more accurately put. So understanding this mundane right view is, as we go out tomorrow, as we leave here today, thinking about how the world really works. And the way we live in it is just pretty much misperception. That person's going to make me happy. That person's attractive. That person's this. I'm chasing what feels good. I'm trying to avoid what doesn't feel good. And life's filled with things that are good, and feel good, and don't feel good. But if I have right view, I'm going to understand, well, given this situation, how do I interact in a way that's going to create good karmic imprints? Number one, good karmic imprints. It's ethical, it's meaningful. And how, when I'm doing this, can I respond with more wisdom and clarity? And now with the right view of understanding that the world I'm living in is subjective and relational, and my experience of it is shrouded through my lens of karma that I've created. That if I change me, everything else changes. Well, now that I have a right view, now I can be a little more accurate in how I respond to people and things. I know that if someone yells at me, and I don't want people to yell at me out of anger, the last thing I should do is yell back out of anger. But what do? Oh, you're not talking to me like that. I yell back out of anger. And we create a cycle of karma. Whereas if somebody's yelling at me, I can see they're human, they're suffering. That's why they're yelling. They're not yelling because they're happy. Out of compassion, I can respond to what they're saying in a way that's more effective, healthier, and now it's planting different karmic imprints, right? So in the world that we live in, we tend to, out of this misperception and not knowing how things are and where my real pleasure comes from, I just fling mud on my windshield. And I seek mundane worldly experience over prolonged, meaningful spiritual experience and evolution. So that's why they put right view at the start. Now with this view, I can go out tonight and deal with people and understanding that this is a very subjective experience. And everyone's out there trying to do the best they can. And it doesn't mean we're doormats. It doesn't mean that I take abuse. It means I respond to the actions of the person without labeling that as their intrinsic nature. It's not personal. There's another human being from their side. What they're doing makes sense. from their experience. My side is what's the most beneficial thing? What's going to cultivate good karmic imprints? And so if you don't want to memorize a 10-point list, and just monitor that in your mind. There's a couple things that I really invite you to do. One is a real simple litmus test. If you want to live ethically, ask yourself before you do things, is this beneficial? Is this the most beneficial thing to do for myself and others right now? Chances are, if you can honestly say yes, whatever you do next is ethical. So we don't always want to get bound up by a list of rules. What we really want to do, and the quote I use all the time, one of my favorite all-time quotes. I've had two of my favorites so far. I've got a lot of favorites. Is never let your sense of morals prevent you from doing the right thing. Right? We don't want to get bound that, situations are unique often, and in this situation, what's the best thing to do? So that's where I really like that. What's the most beneficial thing to do? And so the goal now of the course that we'll have over the next several weeks is really going to provide us the tools to maintain a right view in our life and in our activities as we participate in teachings of the Eightfold Path that are going to cultivate ethics, concentration, wisdom, and how they can be integrated in a way that's practical and meaningful. And it starts with understanding really how the world works and where your happiness and suffering comes from. It's not the outer events. It's how we're responding to them. Okay. So, I stopped with actually, I have 5 whole minutes. Anyone have any questions? I'm just going to pause for a minute. And if not, we can really talk just briefly about karmic weight. I'll just wait here for a second. Yes.
I do have a...
Can you remind me of your name?
I'm Genevieve.
Genevieve. Okay.
It's a little personal, and it's kind of on subject, talking about morality and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
I have to slip out every Wednesday to pick up my child. And I feel so incredibly disrespectful leaving before I have a chance to say thank you and to just have you be able to close well. What is the best way for you? For me to just slip out quietly or just thank you?
You just slip out in a little process. That's nice. And know that from our side, no problem. There's never any problem here. All right, you be well. All right. Yes.
Hi.
Hey there.
I just wanted to get a little clear about when you talk about all of my suffering as a result of non-virtuous activity.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about more sort of in the present time? So I'm thinking, my mind went to, well, what about abuse earlier on?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not a result of my non-virtuous activity necessarily.
Right.
So are you talking about like from now moving forward?
Yeah, no, that's a good question and a really important point because you're actually asking 2 questions. I don't think you know it, but you're asking 2.
Do I get 2?
You get, 2 for the price of 1. So when we talk about karma, if something bad happens to me, that's not necessarily at all my karma. Okay, if somebody abuses me, that's not because I'm a bad, I did this thing in the past and I'm getting the abuse. I have some skin in that game, but just a little bit. And that's where a lot of people, I've had people walk out at me, if they've been abused, because they're thinking we're saying that they created, the reason to have this horrible thing happen to them. And that's not it at all. Karma is very complicated. In order for me to get, let's say, mugged outside today, I leave here and I get mugged. Now, in order for me to get mugged, you think about all the karmic conditions for that. Well, there's the whole lifetime of the person mugging me. And all of their karma and the conditions in the family that they were raised, the economy and what's going on and why would someone need to be, and their experiences in their life, and how dark it is outside, and the timing of things, and the place that we're in. I mean, there's all these layers of karma, that are around whether I get mugged or not, that aren't just about me. What we're talking that's more about uniquely me is my experience of what's happening. So pleasure or unpleasure, or sometimes we're neutral. So if the cake that I'm eating, the pleasurable experience, now that's directly my karmic imprint. Now the conditions and all that are the pie and who baked the pie and all that, those are all conditions. But my internal experience of pleasure, pain, is a result of my karmic imprints. So one is we want to separate bad things happen. I don't like to use the word difficult or challenging, harmful things happening to us. There's a whole layers of stuff. But I can be attacked and I can kind of go with it, not that bad, and have a lot of, or it could be the worst thing that ever happened to me, and have a lot of mental suffering. And that's more my karmic imprint around that. Some people are more resilient naturally. Some people, it's really more devastating. It's how they experience it. And now your second part of that question, which is really about time. So we would say that we're experiencing now resultant karma. So how we experience the world, whether I think so-and-so is attractive, or I think this person's funny, or I think that person's a jerk, or whether this pie is delicious, that's all resultant. That means it's already, I created those seeds a long time ago to experience this world that we're living in and how these things. I've already planned. That's a long time ago, early on. Could even be previous life. What I'm doing now is creating my future experience. So as we plant things now, and what happens is the karmic seeds that happen quickly are the heaviest, the ones with the highest degree of mental attachment to them. Somebody, real harmful things or really wonderful things with incredible merit. They tend to pop up quicker, heavier weight. So does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that question that maybe I should say for a different time. Because like if I don't know, like if I am attacked and I'm a child, and I have suffering, or if I'm mugged tonight, I may be fearful to come in here for a long period of time.
Right.
Which seems to be a lot of it's like a physiological thing. So even though the incident was the result of someone else's karma, I then suffered for a long period of time.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand that piece, and again, it might be a bigger question.
Yeah, bigger question we can talk about. But the thing to relate to is that, you have some skin in that game. It's not all the other person around. We all have some skin in the game. But bear in mind that this is based on the idea that we've all lived innumerable lifetimes. And in all of our lifetimes, eons of lifetimes, we've all done really harmful things, and we've done incredible things. And in the six realms of existence, they would say that all of us have been in God realms, and we've been in these pleasure beings. We've also been in hell realms. We've been animals, we've been human, and in all these capacities, we've done things that were horrific, and we've had horrific things done to us, and we've done things that were incredibly wonderful, and that all those things have done. So this karmic imprint is coming from eons of lifetimes, and so as things happen, the beautiful piece to it though is once something harmful happens, that karma's gone. So from a mind training point of view, if I bust my leg out there, I go outside, somebody whacks me with a bat and busts my leg, great, I just got rid of a bunch of karma. Immediately, that is mind training. It's like, man, that could have been a lot worse, because the longer it sits around, it's going to be worse. And so with the Lojong training, it's pretty cool. We're like, hey, whack me with a baseball bat. It hurts like heck, but I just got rid of some karma. Wow. And it's gone. And it becomes fruit for the path. Yeah.
That helps contextualize it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not encouraging you to all go out and get hit by a bat. I'm just saying if it were to happen, it would be fun. But yeah. So what we're hoping to do then is to send the next series of classes really going through this practical way of seeing a little more clearly, cultivating some really healthy and responsible choices in our life that are going to lead to more pleasure and less suffering. And so we'll work our way through that. And before we do our dedication, I did want to point out, as usual, we got a whole lot of stuff going on. And one of the big events is on December 13th. We're going to have heart-centered holidays. And so right here at Third Street Center, we're going to have a variety of offerings, spiritual offerings and other things for people to do from 9 to, is it 9:30?
9 to 6:30.
Yeah, 9 to 6:30. So different rooms will have different offerings, and I'm sure there's some literature on the back table that has different offerings. We'll do a meditation as well, a metta meditation to kick things off on Saturday. On New Year's Eve, remember, we'll do a special Chenrezig Sig practice here to purify karma. And we'll do the full sadhana of Chenrezig Sig, the Buddha of compassion. So that's a real nice offering. I think if there's some interest, I may even teach a workshop on it, on how to have a daily sadhana practice if you'd like to do that. But we'll do a special one on New Year's Eve, same time. And for those of you out on the internet, just email us if you'd like to participate so we can send you the sadhana so you can follow along as well. And then the other piece is just donations. If you got some, give it up. We're at the end of the year, Way of Compassion Foundation. So we're working into the new year and want to set up a budget. So those of you on the internet, if you'd like to make an offering, again, everything is freely offered, so no obligation. My teacher always said, make sure your needs are met before you give to us. So make sure your needs are met. But if you do have a little left over and want to offer that tax-deductible donation, that can go to the wayofcompassion.org, and there's a donation button there. And those of you here, we brought some malas that we just got from India. So if you're interested in that, we have some of those too. So all that goes and helps the foundation. All right? You want some momos? Yeah. Momos and pie. Yeah, that's maybe what we should. If there's also interest, we could even do a little get-together afterwards. You know? Probably won't do momos, though. That's a lot of labor. But it could be a labor of love, heart-centered love. All right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do a little dedication, dedicating the merit and wisdom we've accumulated here throughout our lives. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom that we've accumulated both here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use both the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to cultivate our path to enlightenment, to obtain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. All right, well, thank you all so much. A joy and an honor to be here. And as always, stay out of trouble and cultivate a right view. And bye-bye.